Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And today I'd like to continue on with my year-long series on the films of 1973. What were films like then? What did they look like then? I was around in 1973 and was an avid film goer. And what do they look like today, 50 years later? So the film I want to talk about today is another Italian film. My last video was on Federico Fellini's Amarcord. And in the same year in Italy was released an Elio Petri film, Property is No Longer a Theft. But I can't tell you what it looked like to me in 1973 because in the US, Property is No Longer a Theft was not released commercially. And in fact, according to IMDb, it was never shown in the U.S. Until 2002 at a museum in San Francisco. Perhaps it was out on VHS. Seems like every movie made it to VHS, but I did not see it until a few years ago when I saw it on the Criterion channel. And in fact, I enjoyed it so much I had to watch it again. This is a very unusual film. But Petri was known in the U.S., so it's kind of sad because that his subsequent films to two films before, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And in fact, Petri and his co-screenwriter for this film received a nomination for Best Screenplay. So. One of the reasons, no doubt, that Property was not released in the U.S. It's a very politically provocative film. Investigation was abuse of power by police, and that was a topic under discussion in the United States as well in 1970. But in the film, Property is very much a part of the times, the historical era that it was made in which there was a great deal of political ferment. There was extreme left, extreme right, there was lots of terrorism. And Petri is confronting the whole idea of property and of capitalism and the soullessness. He was a Marxist. And he saw capitalism as a kind of an infection, a kind of a disease. But whatever, and of course capitalism in the U.S. is sort of like our national religion. But it has, nevertheless, for U.S. audiences, it has such an interesting premise. And this is a story about a very neurotic bank accountant by the name of Total. And he has a physical aversion to money. He has to count money, but when he counts money, he has to wear gloves. And he is, and just the idea of money makes him itchy, so he's always scratching. He has other tics as well. This is a story of neuroses, just as Gian Maria Volante was very neurotic and somewhat crazy in Investigation of a Citizen. And he is tired of all these rich people, arrogant, wealthy people, clients of this bank, and he particularly hates this man who has this financial empire that was based on his origin story of being a butcher. So this accountant, who seems meek and insignificant, he decides that he is going to destroy this butcher. He is going to start stealing from him until he has nothing left. But he starts very, very small. He starts by stealing the butcher's knife. This is his original knife from his first butcher's shop. And this butcher sentimentally continues on being a butcher in his shop, but his knife gets stolen. Then the accountant steals his favorite hat, and this puts the butcher in all kinds of what's going on here. Then he steals the butcher's mistress, and on and on. So this is very much of a a fantasy, a very grotesque fantasy to be sure, grotesque characterizations, but it's full of comedy. Irony, comedy. It can be very jarring at times. It's Brechtian. So these are not characters who you are meant to identify with. In the world of Brechtian theater, the audience is meant to observe what's going on and critique what's going on, not to become emotionally involved with the characters. And it's even more Brechtian in that we have monologues given by all the main characters. So the film suddenly stops, and against a black background, each one of the characters has their moment where they speak directly to us, to the audience. They acknowledge that they're speaking to people sitting in a movie theater, in which they give their own personal critique of who they are. And all of this plays into a feeling, a narrative feeling like, where is this all going? What's it leading to? It's so unusual, so offbeat. Petri, this time in his career, was in a real creative ferment. I mean, the actors in this film, as we learned in the supplements, they were so dedicated to and in awe of Petri's vision. It was a very specific vision. They had a hard time piecing together what that vision might be. It's a very complex vision, to be sure. And he was complex himself because he's very much a Marxist. Again, as we learned in the supplements, he was always spouting left-wing jargon, but he also owned property. He owned many houses. The producer of this film, whose name, Mancini, I think his name is, who was a very famous producer. He produced Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. He says, he would look at Petri and think, well, you're telling me, well, I can't understand what you're even talking about. I know you're a Marxist. Why do you own all these houses? So that's kind of funny in and of itself. But what Petri, I think, what you can get from this film outside of the political or economic discussion is Petri's view is that there are no values in capitalism. Capitalism is almost like a disease of greed. And one of the characters, a quote from one of the characters is, selfishness is the fundamental sentiment of the religion of prosperity. So, and that can go on. Now, I gotta admit, from 50 years down the road, we could say, well, yeah, that's true probably. Capitalism is based on greed and selfishness. Then what's the alternative? We want prosperity, we want jobs. Our perception is you need capitalism for that. And even this level of disgust with capitalism, it seems strange today because you could say that capitalism has pretty much achieved total victory as far as the United States is, for sure, but pretty much probably in the whole world. We are a consumer society. We want to buy things. We evidently get happiness from our consumption. We get a new cell phone every year. We get a new SUV every 3 years. So again, this is a complex issue, I think. And I'm not an economic expert, a political expert. But besides all that, what is really interesting about this film for me is the performances. I'm always a performance-oriented movie watcher, and this cast is superb. Now the the accountant, is played by Flavio Bucci. Now you might notice him, or you might recognize him as from Suspiria, where he played the blind pianist who has a confrontation with his guide dog, very famous scene in Suspiria. He is such an odd-looking guy, and he just suits this part so well. The mistress is played by Davio Nicolodi. Now, she too might strike you as familiar from Dario Argento films. She was in at least 3. She was also the co-writer, and the original story of Suspiria comes from Nicolodi. Now, she did not appear in the film, but I believe she did some of the dubbing of one of the actresses in that film. Her and Argento were lifelong partners, and she is the mother of Asia Argento. I don't have a picture of Mario Scaccia, who plays another thief in this movie, who total goes to try to learn the higher techniques of thievery, which is absolute disaster. But this character is not only a thief, he's also a performance artist, and we first see him in a sort of avant-garde theater where he is dressed half man on one side in makeup and clothing on one side, half woman on the other side, and he stands at angles to the audience. And it's just a terrific performance there. And spoiler alert, he has a death scene that is to die for. I mean, this is a fantastic death scene that Scacchi has in this film. But the real star I haven't mentioned yet, the big star of the film, at least the big name of the film, is Ugo Tognazzi, and he plays the butcher, a role that he really wanted to play, and boy, he plays this role to the hilt. A great Italian actor in many, many films, known for in the United States in a few years for a movie called La Cage aux Folles, which was one of the biggest art film successes of all time. It played forever, and it played on repertory theaters forever afterwards. It was remade in the United States as The Birdcage with Robin Williams. So then we also have a terrific score by Ennio Morricone. Now, Morricone, did he score every Italian film in the 60s and 70s? Thank God, it seems like he did. His score here is very quiet, subdued, but it's full of strange sounds, and some of it can be kind of jarring to suit the jarring nature of the film itself. So overall, I think this is a very important film. I haven't seen all of Petri's films. I've probably seen 5 or 6 now. He is definitely a filmmaker to be remembered. I said in my Fellini video that there was a whole number of Italian film directors that were somewhat obscured by the hegemony of Fellini's fame, especially in the United States. Petri was certainly one of the best of those directors. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.